You're listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. Join us as we explore new frontiers in consciousness, science, and evolution. And now here's your host, Karen Curry Parker.
Every creation begins as a thought. From a symphony to a marriage to an ice cream cone to a rocket launch. When we have an intention, a complex chain of events begins in our brains. Thoughts travel as electrical impulses along neural pathways, and when neurons fire together, they wire together, creating electromagnetic fields. These fields are invisible energy, yet they influence the molecules of matter around us the way a magnet organizes iron filings. In Dawson Church's new book, Mind to Matter, we learn how our minds create matter. Different intentions produce different fields and different material creations. The thoughts and energy fields we cultivate in our minds condition the atoms and molecules around us. In Dawson Church's new book, Mind to Matter, we learn how our minds create matter. Different intentions produce different fields and different material creations. The thoughts and energy fields we cultivate in our minds condition the atoms and molecules around us. Science can now trace behind each link in a chain, from thought to thing, showing the surprising ways in which our intentions create the material world. Neuroscientists have measured a specific brainwave formula that's linked to manifestation. This flow state can be learned and applied by anyone. New discoveries in epigenetics, neuroscience, electromagnetism, psychology, vibration, and quantum physics connect each step of the creation process by which mind creates matter. They show that the whole universe is self-organizing, and when our minds are in a state of flow, they coordinate with nature's emergent intelligence to produce synchronous outcomes. Join me for an inspiring quantum conversation with researcher, energy healer, best-selling author, and teacher, Dawson Church. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Quantum Conversations. We are in the second episode of our second season. So we started last week with Rupert Sheldrake, and this week we have what to me is just a really dear honor. Dawson Church is going to be joining us talking about his brand new book, Mind to Matter, which is a mind-blowing book, as certainly it's just, I'm on a high from this book because I listened to it on Audible over the course of driving through the Smoky Mountains with my daughter, and then driving through Michigan with my husband, who was completely freaked out about this book because we joke that my husband is a muggle. So he really had to take some things seriously and think about things seriously. And I actually sent copies to all of my kids. So I'm very, very excited to be sharing this work with you guys. So I'm going to jump right in because I know some of you have already posted and know about Dawson Church. We actually had Dawson Church last year in a couple of different formats. And it was just really an honor to have him come and share with us. So I'm going to dive right in because we have about 10 hours of content to squeeze into 30 minutes. But we can do that, right? That's in here,
Let's
right?
Dive in.
Okay, so Mind to Matter. This is, to me anyway, a really important collection of scientific evidence that shows that your thoughts really do create your reality. Maybe not literally like click your heels together 3 times and poof, you have a new car. But the way you think influences what you create. So I'm going to just start, and my goal is to go like one question from each chapter. So I want to just start first and talk about, or ask you to explain for us in a nutshell, how does the brain play into this process of creating thoughts into matter?
Yeah, that's a good one to start with. And the brain plays a role, but not the role we used to think it played. So science used to think that the brain, as it became more and more complex over the course of evolution, so 3 billion years of evolution, brains became more and more complicated from single one-celled organisms up to eventually, through reptiles, through mammals, then primates, then humans. And as our brains became bigger and more complex, the idea was that they then gave rise to this phenomenon called mind or consciousness. So the old scientific worldview was that, in the jargon of science, is that consciousness and mind is an quote unquote epiphenomenon of matter. We have these big complex brains, they throw off this thing called mind and consciousness, and that consciousness is a result of that really complex material thing called the brain. And that worldview, compelling though it is, and although it held sway for most of the 20th century, in the book I show all the evidence that demonstrates that worldview and that belief is completely wrong. The brain is much more like a transceiver of information, and it is making things happen and is producing effects on the world around us and in our own bodies, dramatic effects on the world around us and our own bodies. But it is no more the creator of that information than the device on which you're watching this broadcast is creating the broadcast. It's just a tool for transceiving the broadcast and presenting it to you. That's what our brains do. And when you look at phenomena, there's a whole science called emergence. And that's the science that looks at how birds fly. At the end of each chapter of Mind to Matter, there is a section called Extended Play. And I have videos in that extended play section. I have lists, I have resources, I have links. And one of the videos there is a flock of 4 million starlings, little tiny little birds, starlings, 4 million of them just wheeling and swooping, 4 million birds in complete coordination. There are videos there of fireflies blinking in unison. Mm-hmm. There are videos of fish swimming in schools. How do they do this? Well, the science of emergence is the study of how there's this order that emerges from complex systems. And so our brains are receiving information just the way those starlings are, just the way those fish are, and they're actually coordinating our brains, and our brains are coordinating us with that whole universal picture. So we're receiving this information from these huge information fields all around us, and then we're materializing that. And there are studies that I cover in quite some depth in the book showing that literally as we think about things, as with our consciousness, we perceive things, we are literally creating the world around us.
Mm. So I want to take each one of these concepts and just plug them into real life. And I'm going to do it in the context of my husband because I love him so much and he makes me so happy that I do what I do for a living. So when you say the brain creates this world around you, and let's say hypothetically my husband was obsessed with Donald Trump. He isn't really, but maybe he is. And this is where his thoughts are going. What does this do to his reality? Like, how does this affect his world?
All kinds of ways. Yeah, all kinds of ways. So let's go from the small to the large. So on the smaller scale, it is producing molecules in your body. When you have an emotional reaction, say, you're an emotional Trump supporter. And so when Trump does something and there is all this negative media around something he does, and you're a supporter, and so you get all riled up and you defend him. Or if you are an opponent of his and you get all riled up and you attack him. Either one of those stances, attacking or defending him, is producing an increase in stress hormones in your body. And I've done a lot of research on cortisol, and cortisol is our main stress hormone. So literally by your thoughts, by what you think about Donald Trump, you can be producing all kinds of biological changes in your body. You can be changing the level of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine in your brain. You certainly are changing the level of anandamide, which is a molecule I talk about quite a bit in Mind to Matter, which is also called the bliss molecule. Ananda is a Sanskrit word for bliss, and anandamide is a neurotransmitter in your brain. And when you're feeling feelings of warmth and intimacy and love and connection, you make lots of the hormone oxytocin. Oxytocin triggers the production of anandamide, so you feel good. That's why when you're in love, you feel so wonderful. So that's the state you're in when you're at peace, when you have low levels of stress. But when you get stressed, when you have an argument with somebody, when you disagree with your spouse, when you remember a past conflict, when you recall a childhood trauma, any of those things produces an increase in cortisol that decreases other hormones like DHEA, like oxytocin. Then that anandamide vanishes in your brain and you don't feel very good at all. So that's how it's affecting us at the level of the very small. So I cover dozens of studies showing how it affects stem cell production. Stem cells are your healing cells. They're blank cells that differentiate into bone and muscle and nerves and other tissues, and you need lots of stem cells. People who are sick often have insufficient stem cells. So literally, this is triggering stem cell production in your body. It's triggering telomere production. Telomeres are your main anti-aging molecules. And so if you're feeling good and unstressed, you make those telomere molecules. If you aren't, you don't. So it's affecting us at the level of the very small. Then at the level of the large, it's affecting us as well. And I had a lot of fun reading about, when I began working on the book, I thought I would find that there was some science supporting mind to matter, thoughts to things. But I thought I'd be looking at a chain of events, and I knew I'd find lots of broken links. I knew I'd find that there was some proof of this, but there wasn't a lot of proof. I found there are no scientific broken links in that chain from thing. And so on the large scale, one of the really interesting fields of study I looked at is called emotional contagion. And emotional contagion is how literally emotions are contagious, like the flu, like colds, like infectious diseases. So you catch them from the people around you. And so when you're upset about something, when you're mad about something, when you're resentful, when you're guilty, when you're blaming, when you're feeling negative emotions, you are literally, your energy field is changing, your electromagnetic field in your brain is changing, the entire field around your body is changing, and you're producing negative emotional contagion among people around you. Not only that, in the research I review in the book, I show that you aren't just affecting the person one layer out from you, you're affecting that person, and they're affecting the person one layer out from them, and they're affecting the person one layer out from them. You're affecting people at least 3 layers out with emotional contagion. And if you calm yourself, if you meditate, if you do EFT tapping, which I talk about in the book as well, if you have ways of reducing your stress, then you feel good, you're making lots of oxytocin, you're making lots of anandamide, but you're producing positive emotional contagion all around you. And so that then is having an effect on your relationships, on your community, and you are literally shifting the entire emotional tone of the world around you by the quality of that. And then just one final study I'll mention in that emotional contagion section was the Facebook users. And these researchers, 2 researchers, decided to manipulate the feeds of Facebook users. And within a few days, they were able to produce emotional contagion in 750,000 Facebook users. That's how pervasive these effects are, either for good or for bad, that we have inside ourselves. So we are literally creating the world in all kinds of ways, as well as at the level of very small inside our own bodies with those neurotransmitters and hormones.
So I think about this in the context of, what I'll call light workers, people who want to do good in the world, and who sometimes feel powerless in response to tragic events. And there's been kind of this meme on Facebook ever since, I think, the Parkland shootings. People have been sort of saying, love and light, let it go, get out there and do something. But I think what this kind of research really implies is that being in a space of staying aligned with love, I don't want to say positive feelings around tragedy in that respect, but staying in a place where you hold the energy of love and you stay in that empowered space with your emotions really does have the potential to maybe obviously not change the circumstances, but change the nature of what's influencing perhaps the circumstances in the first place.
You do. You literally can have an effect a long, long way away from you. And at the end of the book, I talk about distant effects, and we measure these for a long time. So we measure distant healing, distant intentions. Some of the studies on Qigong show that Qigong masters can project energy, and people even 10,000 miles away can heal. And some of the healing research shows that these healing abilities are not specific to one religion, that they're there in Native American shamanism, that they're there in South American shamanism, that they're there in Christian, what do they call it in laying on of hands, Christian faith healing traditions. They're there in Judaism, in Kabbalism, in Kabbalah, in Hinduism, and Buddhism. All these religions have the ability of people to heal at a distance. And so we've always wondered about that, how telepathy and clairvoyance and distant healing, how are all these distant effects possible? And they've seemed very spooky. A lot of skeptics cast aspersions on them, say they can't be real, they must be fraud. But there's tons of research on these kinds of distant effects and people affecting each other. And this was one I just had an amazing journey on in the book. I began to write the chapter on synchronicity. And my plan, when I first sent the outline into the publisher, was just to write a very brief 5-10 page chapter on synchronicity. And it would be the shortest chapter in the book. It would have some stories about synchronicities happening. And that was all I could say about synchronicity. I found there is such amazing science behind synchronicity. It's now the longest chapter in the book, and it's packed with information and data, as well as synchronicities. As I was writing that chapter, I had synchronicity after synchronicity after synchronicity slap me in the face, and now finally, it's quite a big, complicated theory, but some very, very new data has been published in scientific journals now, showing that there are giant information fields that are much larger than the Earth. They're at least the size of the solar system and maybe the size of the galaxy. That these are measurable information fields that scientists can actually record using giant electromagnetic measuring devices. And so in one of the very last studies I talk about in the book, I have a graph. I have a graphic. And the graphic is these giant cosmic cycles for 30 days. And they go up and they go down. They fluctuate quite a bit over those 30 days. Then, right below that, there is the heart rate variability chart for that same 30 days of a seasoned meditator who's in heart coherence. Now, the average person is not in heart coherence, and their chart is just all over the place. The seasoned meditator, his chart is exactly in sync with those cosmic galactic fluctuations all 30 days. It is amazing. So the implication is not only are you in sync with the universe, are you in sync with that emergent reality, but you are in sync with everyone else who is. That's why synchronicities happen. That's why there are all these synchronous things that are just popping up, because if you're in sync with everyone else who is in sync. That's a really solid beginning of a scientific explanation for clairvoyance, telepathy, distant healing, and distant intention effects.
Beautiful. So I want to take this conversation into a little bit of a different twist. And this takes it into an area that I thought, frankly, from the title of the book, that this was sort of where we were going. We've had since 2005 all this conversation about manifesting and law of attraction, and how you deliberately create using the power of your mind. And even if you go back and look at Napoleon Hill, right? We have got to slip my mind. I'm obviously not in sync with Napoleon Hill at the moment, but the Think and Grow Rich says, thank you. This whole idea that your thoughts create your reality. And what I really, really appreciate and really encourage everybody to go read is that it takes that conversation to a very different place, that it's not about so much, okay, I'm going to hold the vision of the car and I think about the car, and then I'm going to see the car all over the road because that's my sign, and then the car is going to show up. But you really talk about bringing yourself maybe in sync with your divine creative essence. You bring the science into that, and that maybe that means that you're not so much in control of certain aspects of what you create, and that's okay. That's not a failure, and that's not, oh, I'm doing it wrong, which is a conversation I hear a lot from people that, oh, I focused on this amount of money and it didn't show up. I want to bring up something that, well, first of all, I just want to know, what are your thoughts on that? Or what would you tell people when they start to feel like, I'm doing it wrong, or I feel so discouraged. I have positive thoughts and nothing positive is showing up. And, how do you guide people through that?
I have a whole segment in my live workshops which explores that very topic, why some people are what I call master manifestors and some people are hopeless in manifestation. Like I'm thinking about, I have some wonderful friends like Jack Canfield. Jack Canfield is simply a brilliant manifester and is a really deliberate manifester. And if Jack wants something to happen, it is highly likely that thing will manifest. And so I know a whole bunch of people like that who are just, if they want something, it's going to happen. I know other people, like I had one friend called, let's call her Jill. And Jill had wonderful visions. She was just a visionary, had beautiful ideas about what she wanted to see happen. And nothing she ever wanted to see happen ever happened. I mean, she's just a completely hopeless manifester. Why are some people master manifestors and some people no good at manifesting? And they are both doing the same things. They have a vision board. They have affirmations. They are writing them in their journal. They're making sure that they're vivid. They're doing all the same stuff. Why is one person's affirmations? Why are one person's affirmations coming true and the other person's not? So the answer, I've been intrigued by this question for a long time, and I answer it in chapter 5 of Mind to Matter, which is called The Power of Coherent Mind. And the power of coherent mind, that explains it. And what I do is I've been taking EEG brainwave readings now from many people over the course of the last about 5 years. And what happens is that when we're in a normal state of consciousness, I show you what that looks like in terms of brainwaves in the book, you are in a certain configuration of the 8 basic brainwaves. And so you're in that basically ordinary consciousness. People who are master manifestors come into highly coherent brainwave functions. And I have an EEG readout in the book of an incoherent brain next to a coherent brain. And you'll see they look very, very different. Those master manifestors have the power of coherent mind and coherent brain. And the cool thing about a coherent brain and a coherent heart coherence and brain coherence, is that those rhythms entrain everything else in your body. They entrain your peristalsis, your digestion. They govern the rise and fall of hormones and neurotransmitters. So that coherent mind is the magic difference. And people who are manifesting, in one study, for example, done at HeartMath, they had people intend to change the configuration of DNA. And DNA is a double helix molecule. It can be twisted tighter or looser. And they told people in the study to focus. There were 2 bottles of human DNA. And they said, make the one on the right, make the molecules twist tighter together. And people put that intention toward that vial of DNA. Nothing happened. When those people entered heart coherence and then held the intention, molecule twisted. At one point, they had one of their volunteers do this to a vial of DNA that was 50 miles away. And they said, we want you to make the middle vial of DNA twist tighter, and the 2 on either side not affect those 2 at all. And this person in a state of high coherence, coherent mind, coherent heart, having that intention, was able to affect only the middle vial and not the 2 on the side. So it's not having the intention that counts. It's having the intention in coherent minds. That's half the answer. And the other half of the answer is what I talk about at the beginning, the end of Mind to Matter, is non-local mind. And so when you are thinking that you are, if I'm thinking my name's Dawson Church, I wake up in the morning and people ask, what's your name? And I say Dawson Church. I've been doing that for more than 60 years now. Dawson Church. I know my name's Dawson Church. I'm wearing a kind of a reddish and bluish shirt today, and it's a sunny day here in Petaluma, California. So I have all these beliefs, and that part of the brain, when it's highly active, anchors those beliefs in place. But in studies of long-term meditators, those studies show that that same part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is quiet. It's not highly active. And those meditators lose themselves in bliss, lose themselves in connection with non-local mind. So they are now in tune with the signal that's keeping the birds flying in flocks and the fish swimming in schools and the seasons. And they're now in tune with that universal non-local mind. And when you're in coherence and when you are one with non-local mind and you're creating from non-local mind and you're using your brain as a transceiver to bring in information from non-local mind, you are a powerful creator and a powerful manifester, and the right things are happening and good things are happening because you're doing it from this space of connection. So those are the two pieces of the puzzle there.
So if you were going to say to, there's like 20, do we have 10 hours? Because I have like 10 hours worth of questions for you.
I'll come back on again in a week.
Okay. So, all right. So I want to shift to a similarly related topic and hopefully be able to wind it back with this final question. So the next part of that story is that when you run into people who are, say, not manifesting or they are maybe in coherence, but they're living a very, intentional life, and then terrible things happen to them, and we say, "Oh, well, you must have not had the right mindset," or "What's going on?" And you're thinking that you're manifesting this illness, or in your case, and last year you lost your home in the Santa Clara fires, and it was a pretty cataclysmic event and pretty shocking and I'm assuming transformative. How do you explain to people what happened, why it happened? Did your mind create that? How do we talk to people who are very enlightened and spiritual and suddenly develop cancer or their children die or, what do you say to people?
Yeah. Well, it's not like this is some kind of magic wand ability that just makes all the bad things go away in your life. So people still do get sick. They still do age. They may have financial difficulties. They may have relationship problems. They may have job losses, financial losses. But what happens is that when you are in that state of manifestation, you are emotionally resilient. In chapter 1 of Mind to Matter, I have just a stunning case history, just an absolutely amazing case history. Now, in the book, there's obviously a ton of science there, but I also have over 100 stories of people, real life stories of real life people who apply these sorts of techniques in their lives and had radical changes in their lives. And the one that just really was powerful for me in chapter 1 was a story of a guy called Graham Phillips. And Graham Phillips was a hard-bitten TV journalist. He didn't believe in meditation and all the kind of stuff we think is so powerful. Thought the law of attraction was completely ridiculous, and he was not a believer. And but he'd heard about the health benefits of meditation and thought, I'm going to try it. I'm going to sincerely focus on being mindful and doing an 8-week meditation program. So he did. But before he did, he's a TV journalist. He went into Monash University in Australia, where he lives, and he had a comprehensive workup by some behavioral and research psychologists there. They measured the volume of each part of his brain. So we can measure how big your parietal lobe is, how big your hippocampus is, how big your amygdala is. We can measure all of those things with millimetric precision. So he had these MRI brain scans done and a whole battery of tests. And so that was before he began his practice. 2 or 3 weeks into the practice, he found himself much calmer. He had much better relationships. He wasn't screaming and yelling at people. He began to be a nicer person. And after 8 weeks, he went back into Monash University and they remeasured his brain. Now, there's this phenomenon called neural plasticity, which is very well understood now, that when you pass a signal through a neural bundle repeatedly, it grows, but it grows fast. In some studies, they show that the neural bundle is doubling in size every hour you pass a signal through it. So parts of your brain are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And when Graham Phillips went back in after just 8 weeks of mindfulness, the part of his brain that handles emotional regulation It's called the dentate gyrus. It's part of the hippocampus in the center part of your brain, the dentate gyrus. His dentate gyrus had grown by 22.8% in 8 weeks. Think about that. Our brains are remodeling themselves radically, day by day, year by year, based on our thoughts alone. Now, when you have that increased bulk of tissue handling resilience, handling emotional regulation, you are a resilient person. So those bad things may still happen to you. You may still have a random car crash. You may still have lose your money in the stock market. You may still have a fire sweep away your house. But you are highly resilient. And we, in fact, when my wife and I, it was so funny because when we got out, we literally, the fire, she woke me up at 12:45, and there was just a glow on the horizon over the hill next to us. And so I got out of bed, walked outside, and in those few seconds, the fire was sweeping down the valley toward our community. And so we literally grabbed our car keys, sprinted for the car, and like she describes how when she was we were driving out at high speed, she felt heat on her head and thought, why is my head so hot? She looked up through the moonroof of the car, and all the tree limbs were in flames above her head. I mean, it was a crazy night. And so we were very disoriented the first couple of days. We were just like refugees. We didn't know what was happening. There was no hard data. We didn't know whether our house had survived or not. So the second day, though, I said to her, we need to do something, and it's an emergency, and we have to do it right now, and that's meditate. And so we sat there and we dropped in. We moved ourselves into that state, which I call in the book, we call it the awakened mind state. And I talk about how to get into awakened mind in Mind to Matter. So we acquired the awakened mind state, and we suddenly felt as though we were ourselves again. We were back where we were. We heard that our home had been destroyed, and so that same day, this is just 48 hours after the fire. I was saying things to her like, remember those big boxes of photographs of my mom's that have been in the garage for the last 20 years, and no one wants the chore of going through my mom's old blurry snapshots from the 1950s. And, those boxes have been there for so many years, reproaching me that I just shove them up against the back wall. And they sag a little bit every year, and I shove them back again to avoid having to deal with them. Guess what? Those boxes are gone. I don't ever have to go through them. And so we began to think about, like there was an old massage chair I was supposed to list on Craigslist and sell. It's like, do I have time to list this thing on Craigslist? I mean, it's been sitting there for 4 or 5 years, not dealt with in the garage. It's like, the massage chair's gone. I don't have to list it on Craigslist and sell it. And so we were just cracking up like that. Now, so that's us. It's less than a year from the fire. This last weekend, we were at a party, and we talked to a woman at the party, and she said, I talked to a friend of mine yesterday, and she is so bitter about the fire. So a year later on, are you bitter, or are you recreating your life the way you want it to be? We wanted to move from that place, from that area for years. We were just kind of stuck there. We had a beautiful home, but it wasn't where we wanted to be actually. So we wanted to move to Petaluma. And so like the day afterwards, we just realized we would find a new home in Petaluma. I texted the manager who runs our business the day after. I said, we've always been talking about having a paperless office. Now we really do have a paperless office. And we posted a photograph on my blog, and when we finally got back into the wreckage, like the whole office was burned. There was 2 inches of ash. That was it. I mean, burned the file cabinets. It burned. There's nothing left of the refrigerator. I mean, this was the aluminum wheels on I had several old sports cars, and the aluminum wheels was puddles of aluminum. And the glass melted. The fire was so hot. And sitting in this pile of ash that was the office of Energy Psychology Group, there was a Buddha, and the Buddha was completely untouched. So this Buddha just sitting there in the ashes. And I wrote a blog about that. So you have bad stuff happen to you, but you're resilient. You have all that emotional resilience because you have a large amount of tissue in the brain around emotional regulation. You see things in a positive way. You frame things in a positive way. You make lemons out of lemonade, and you have a really good life as a result. So those things don't hammer you the way they do that woman who said that she was bitter less than a year after the fire. You absolutely, you owe it to yourself to rescue yourself from those negative emotions, because long term they have a terrible effect on your body.
Thank you for that. And thank you for modeling that so beautifully, because I think we don't always see what that looks like. And I just want to just throw out here, because I've watched people who have dealt with serious illnesses and even death in this positive thought community that I think we float in. And there is blaming, like, what did you do? And I think we have to factor in, sometimes there's just mystery, and we don't always know what the mystery is about, and that you can't fight it. So align with it and find the blessings and the grace in it, as you did. So thank you for that.
Let me tell you one more story about that from a friend of mine, and she's coming out of the book on this. I wrote the foreword, so this is not confidential. But she was diagnosed last March with a malignant tumor in her right breast. It was a large, solid tumor in her right breast. It had metastasized to the lymph nodes under her arm. They were full of cancer cells. When cancer gets into your lymph system or your bloodstream, it can be carried very rapidly throughout your body. They also found 3 spots on her right lung. So this is a really serious diagnosis. She was being treated at MD Anderson Cancer Clinic in Houston, Texas. And when the morning that the oncologist met with her to give her the diagnosis, the oncologist said, "We want you in radiation today. It's that serious. Not tomorrow or the next day or making an appointment next week. We want you in radiation this afternoon." Now, this friend of mine believes in energy. And so she began to do everything she could to change the energy in her life. She declined treatment. She didn't even get a biopsy. They only did scans to assess her. She went and did intensive Qigong. She emailed me and said, "Dawson, I've had a gene test. I have 8 defective genes that predispose me to breast cancer." I said to her, "Well, Beth, you have 24,000 genes that are just totally fine. Let's work with those." And so we did energy work with her. We did EFT, emotional freedom techniques with her. She did intensive Qigong with herself. She cleaned up her diet. She turned off all of her alerts. She quit watching the news. She quit any kind of negative emotional impact. Now, again, this is March. She got the diagnosis. By May, 2 months later, her lymph nodes were clear. And a couple months after that, the tumor became necrotic and was reabsorbed by her body, disappeared, and all of her blood work showed she was cancer-free. So it is possible to have, and there are lots of those miraculous healing stories in the book. Now, it's not whether you live or die, but it is working with the energy in your life that's important. When you are faced with a situation, how is your energy? How is your emotional energy? How is your spiritual energy? What energy are you bringing from non-local mind to this? Are you stuck in this little story about, oh, me as a victim and a limited self? Or are you moving into the expansive sense of being one with the universe and living from that place, visioning from that place, dreaming from that place, visualizing and affirming from that place? Because the vision that universe has of who you are and how grand your life is far more expansive than the little local one you have over here in your prefrontal cortex.
Teeny tiny human brain. So just real quick, give us, if you were going to tell somebody, okay, look, your emotional energy, you need to fix it. Here are 5 things you can do today to start shifting your emotional energy, your mind, into a more positive, creative space so that your mind can create matter that feels better and has more meaning, is more juicy. What would you tell somebody to do?
Meditate. Number 1 is meditate, because meditation is the baseline of well-being, and huge numbers of changes happen in your body when you meditate. You also produce brain waves, slow brain waves, and the 2 slowest waves are delta, the slowest wave, 0 to 4 cycles per second, and theta, 4 to 8 cycles per second. Above that, there's alpha, which is 8 to 13 cycles per second. And so you produce lots of those theta and delta waves. And again, I'm hooking people up and measuring them. And when they meditate, they start to produce many of those, many more, much greater amplitude of those key brain waves. So that has a big effect on your body. It triggers the expression of certain genes. In one study of meditation, we found that there were a number of key genes that were shifted by meditation. So it's epigenetic. And that was my previous book, The Genie in Your Genes, is all about epigenetics and how we can literally turn genes on and off in our bodies with our emotions and our thoughts and our spiritual experiences. So the first thing to do is meditate. The second thing to do is learn EFT, emotional freedom techniques, tapping, which uses acupuncture. And that's that other little book of mine. I wrote that book, and it's out of stock, by the way, most places now. The publisher's reprinting it. It'll be in stock again soon. But it's just a fabulous resource because it calms you down in seconds. And we work now with literally thousands and thousands of veterans. We work with survivors of the Holocaust, the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, when about 1 million people were hacked to death. Terrible trauma, terrible PTSD. We worked with those people. We worked with people in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake there. We worked with all kinds of people in natural and human-caused disasters. And we find that as we tap with them, as we use EFT tapping with them, their levels of PTSD symptoms just go away in a few sessions. Very, very powerful technique. So number 2, is use tapping. So meditation, number 1, for that baseline of feeling good every morning. Number 2 is learn tapping. Then in the book, I introduce people to about maybe 25 or 30 other practices you can use: grounding and movement, somatic types of shifting, things like qigong, tai chi, yoga, and so on. There are lots of them. And beyond, I believe that meditation and tapping are things every human being needs in his or her toolkit. But beyond that, you might really like one above another. Like my wife really loves yoga. That just really speaks to her. That's her thing. Mine is qigong. I use qigong where she uses yoga. So there's no one size fits all. And beyond those 2 foundational practices of meditation and tapping, I just recommend you play around. Yours might be time with nature. It might be time with friends that's emotionally intimate, or might be holding other people, might be hugging a child, it might be volunteering in the homeless shelter. It's important to find what works for you, and it's unique to your lifestyle. So as for the other things, it's just, I try to expose people to them all in the book, but then what you pick is what works for you.
So I just want to, again, point you guys to the book. It's Mind to Matter by Dawson Church. You can get it on Amazon. He also has, and I know you mentioned this when you talked about the birds, and I love this because you are such a generous content creator, and probably your publisher went, okay, that's enough, Dawson.
Yeah, that's great.
But he also has, at the end of each chapter in the book, sort of adjunct materials and interviews and videos and things that you can go watch. That is at the mindtomatter.club, not .com, but mindtomatter.club, CLUB. Like, we're going to go to the club. So go check that out. And also, I just want to throw this out here because I think this is also such a powerful resource. You also have your eco meditation for anybody that's, really feels like, oh, I can't meditate or I can't ever settle down. Can you also give us the link for where they can find information about your eco meditation?
That's also on mindtomatter.club. And let me just read to you, we got an email from somebody just a few days back, which he gave us permission to share. And I'm just going to read that to you now, because this is what I want to hear. The book is inspiring literally tens of thousands of people so far to meditate and to practice these techniques. So I didn't want to just have an inspirational book that was like a fun intellectual exercise. I wanted something that would motivate people to practice the things that can change their lives. And this is a woman called Toni Tombleson, and she gave us permission to use her name and to put her quote up there on the page. So we're getting the cutest stories as well on our on the book page on Facebook of people who are applying this, and, for example, having synchronicities in their lives. Suddenly, things are appearing that weren't appearing before. So people are posting all these amazing stories about manifestation and synchronicity and clairvoyance and telepathy and remarkable shifts going on in their lives. But anyway, Tony writes that when I sat down to try eco-meditation, my mind said, "You've been trying to meditate for years. It never works. This won't work either." And she sat there and she says that when I got to the fourth step, which is a breathing exercise, it's a super simple method of meditation. When I got to the fourth step, suddenly my heart cracked open. I was in bliss. Tears filled my eyes. And I was in the place I've always wanted to be. I'm going to do this every day from now on. So that's what I want to hear. I want to be motivating people to make those changes in their lives. I don't want to just be inspiring people with a good feeling, intellectual idea. I want people to apply these things in their lives. I have the simplest things I possibly can give you, but they're evidence-based. They are based in science, and that's why we know they're effective. These are not techniques I think are a good idea, or I believe might help you. Everyone is backed by a raft of scientific studies, so that's why the book is referenced, and then I give you these evidence-based techniques to apply in your life.
Absolutely, and I just want to throw something out here because I completely agree with you about the meditation piece. And I have been a transcendental meditator for 34 years this year. And I have 8 children, and fitting in 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at the night has always been a little, or in the afternoon or whenever, has been challenging all my life. And the eco meditation, for those of you who think, oh, I don't have time, or I can't, it's not nearly as involved. It's a beautiful, simple technique. Do it. Even if I would say universally, I've heard people say over and over again, if you can't, think you can't, do eco meditation because you will. And that's just kind of a guarantee. So go check it out.
Yeah, there are links also on mindmeta.club. So when you go to the site, you'll find a page with 7 15-minute meditations that guide you through things like remodeling your DNA, tuning your cells to the energy of health, to feeling inner peace. So they actually match the 7 chapters of the book, and they're a way of applying the message of the book in your daily life. It's a powerful way to do this, and it doesn't take long. 15 minutes is fine. It produces all of those beneficial changes inside your cells.
Yep, perfect. Good. Thank you. Dawson, thank you so much for joining us. David, thank you so much for running all the machinery and the buttons and everything. Thank all of you for joining us live. And it's just, I'm so grateful for all the work that you've contributed to the world. Thank you for everything that you do and everything that you are.
Bless you. Thanks for sharing it with your folks.
Thank you.
Understanding how the mind creates matter leaves us with a profound understanding of the enormous creative potential of our minds. It also gives us a roadmap to cultivating powerful brain states in our daily lives so that our daily lives become synchronous and harmonious. Like birds moving together synchronistically in a flock, in sync with divine inner timing, we have the ability to use that same possibility of magic and perfect timing to create the lives we dream of. When we learn to deliberately use the power of our emotions, minds, and hearts in coherence, we can create beyond the limitation of what our minds think is possible. You may have heard the phrase, "I create my own reality." To harness that creative power, you not only have to get your mind, body, and spirit in harmony, you also have to know who the I is who is creating your reality. You have to understand how you operate, where you may be conditioned away from your authentic place in the world, and you have to know how to connect to your own truth, your own unique part of the cosmic plan. And you have to know how to interface with that cosmic plan. You are a cosmic once-in-a-lifetime event. you can create magic in your life when you live true to who you really are. Would you like to learn more about the blueprint for your destiny and your unique way to connect with the cosmic plan? Please visit www.quantumalignmentsystem.com, where you can get your free human design chart and a customized report to help you remember who is the you who is creating your reality. The world needs you to take your right place in the cosmic plan. I look forward to continuing to create this amazing world we are in with you. I'm Karen Curry Parker, and thank you for joining me for a quantum conversation.
Thanks for listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. For more information, visit joyfulmission.com.